Mr. Schron,
Here?
Mr. Hairston,
Here.
Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Greenspan is absent. Mr. Germana,
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, and I appreciate everybody coming. Is there any public comment related to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in.
Okay, and does everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the July 11th meeting? The chair moves that we adopt the July 11th meeting. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approval of the July 11th meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I don't hear any, so minutes are approved. If we could read the first ordinance into the record. These are ordinances, and I'll give my background before or after we read it. Go ahead.
Ordinance 2015-0017, amending Chapter 709 of the Cuyahoga County Code to establish a competitive review process for the award of casino revenue fund loans, enacting Section 207.05, creating the Casino Revenue Development Committee.
As the proponent for this, one of the reasons why I did not want to do anything with this is because obviously we were considering the community development supplemental grant, which has now passed and put in place. So I didn't want the two to be in competition with one another, and so I just held that back until the other one went forward. I have long believed that that money is a finite source; it's not infinite, and so therefore I had proposed my piece of legislation, which was talking about the remainder portion of the casino revenue, and now it's even a little bit significantly less with the community development fund in there. And it was to have a competitive process so that we, the council, didn't always get stuck in the situation of having to decide. There would be an independent body that would help. It would still not leave the council as far as final approval, but the idea behind it would be that instead of, as we had with, not that they're good programs or bad programs, but the Euclid Corridor program, Euclid proposal came in with no venting whatsoever from anybody out there as far as whether it was a good or bad proposal. And we do know, that, again, that funds were finite. We had the Van Aken proposal from Shaker Heights fall into that same category. So what my legislation does is it says that you can make a proposal that comes in from a community, can come in from a business, can come in from different sources, that there would be rules and competitive process created, and competitive processes can be done in such a way that the best and brightest will rise to the top, and you can have a program that I believe could be written up by the committee itself. You'll see that I've got a proposed substitute to this, which I will submit to make sure it gets approved with, I think, what would address some of the issues that people are concerned about. That being that any final scoring would have to come back before council to get approved. Any final review would have to come back to council to get approved. So the work would be then done to address also in this proposed substitute to eliminate all the redundancy that is no longer necessary, where we had the first couple of years of monies going into downtown, and remove the provision that you have to have an exception for it to go outside in the suburbs. That's no longer necessary now that we've moved into this portion of the time calendar. And then the last thing is also there's been an addition to allow for executive session. Even though these are all would be public meetings, there would be an opportunity for them to go into executive session should it be necessary. So with that, I'm going to propose a substitute and ask for a second so we can discuss those things. Has everybody had a chance to have this substitute in their hands? It's been moved and seconded out there. And now I'll throw it open for discussion as far as the concepts. But I alluded to those concepts, which are to take out where we had a repeal, where it wasn't necessary to have the downtown and all those conversations. Those have all been lifted out. It also, our staff, Mike has done a good job in trying to making sure that the proposed substitute reconciles back with the Community Development Supplemental Grant Program that Dave Greenspan put in place. So now that that has been incorporated, so it's a smoothing impact on that. The second last item is that you'll see the scoring criteria is to be developed by the committee, but it will only be put in place by the council actually reviewing it, having the opportunity to amend it, and then having the council have the opportunity to actually approve the resolution out there as far as the scoring criteria. And if you remember, for Anthony was not here, but Chuck, you were, when we created the original economic development plan with a $100 million fund, we had that same ability to do review of the scoring. The scoring came into us, and we did make changes. Anybody who thinks that this council is quiet and shy doesn't know this council very well. And I'm sure that what would happen is that when that came, the time that the council president would probably send it back to this committee for a review of the draft of the resolution as far as the scoring and criteria. Having had the opportunity to serve in the Clean Ohio Fund, I can tell you that unequivocally this did work. It worked effectively. It was a way in which the best programs and best processes came to the surface, and people had to actually come in, make a pitch, tell them why their program was better than the others out there. And then last thing is that our staff has actually added the executive session opportunity to go into there. Of course, they can't go in executive session unless it meets the same criteria that any other executive session would meet, and so they're all public events out there. So with that, I'd love to have any comments from my colleagues that sit in this committee as to where we are in creating a competitive process for the future in the economic development. And remembering, of course, that by the finance and funding on the budget, we did turn over $3.5 million this year to the county executive out of the budget directly, and next year it'll be $4 million that goes directly to the budget. So those funds are already gone. They're not being subject to what we're talking about here, and the community development supplemental grant has also been pulled out of there. So with that, any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Urbana.
I just want to reiterate the reason we were requesting that there be scoring, because the prior government was held to be political, who you knew, and there were special programs and so on and so forth. Now everything is based on merit, non-political, based on the criteria, and I think that's the way it should be.
Well, that was the founding principle of what we're trying to do with this piece of legislation out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Harrison? Yes.
Yes, I've heard those issues were raised early on coming to council. So I agree that we need some sort of process to make sure that we are awarding the best possible projects that come before us. Question: who sets the criteria that they'll be scored by? Is it Department of Development, or is there a criteria that's already set up?
No, the criteria is not set up. That's where
do.
it's almost exactly. And again, I'll just go back 4 years ago when the then county executive had submitted the idea for this $100 million fund and how you're going to go about that. It came to us. We adopted the concept, which is what we really have here. Right. Then we said to, in that particular case, it was the Economic Development Department who then created the criteria. We reviewed it.
Right.
We made adjustments to it and sent it back to
So
them.
it'll be in line with what we use for that fund.
Exactly. The only difference in this is it would not be economic development that would create, it would be the 5-member committee that would write it up. My only assumption is that they would look to perhaps council staff, which is what we helped get engaged in it. I'm sure they would look to the executive staff to help get them engaged, but they would actually have the responsibility to then present it back, and then we would then either, I can't speak for Council President Brady, but I would think if it came to us, he would then send it to our committee here to crunch it down, which is what happened with the $100 million fund too. So if you don't like something, boom, say something. If you do like it. And I think that what came to this committee when we had the $100 million fund and the scoring criteria was it came to us and maybe 85% was acceptable. And we made tweaks on the other 15. Would that be about right on that, Chuck? So that's the same basis that I would envision it's going to take.
Thank you. My other point is, so let's say if it comes to this committee, is this the end all? You know, if we don't particularly agree with the scoring that's come out of what the committee has submitted, and this committee, this AED committee, you know, believes that well, we understand that this is weighed or this is scored at a certain number, and for the reason it was sent to us, and if we don't agree, do we send it back and then that's it? Or does it go back to the committee for it to be tweaked and then come back to us, or what is that? What
Okay,
does that look like?
maybe I misunderstood your first question then. To create the criteria and what the techniques would be and what the written piece of paper would be so that every business, community, nonprofits would be able to look at it and say, okay, I understand what you're expecting and here's what I've got to do and my proposal has got to do this. That's the first step is getting something written.
Right, I get that,
So
yeah.
that's the criteria. Let's now go into the committee of 5 and they have 10 proposals. They only have enough money for 3. They're going to score it, get their best objective and say, okay, these are the best 3 out of that. And actually Mike can, if he wants to give us some comment on that, that would then, they would recommend, let's say it's $2.5 million and they recommend City A gets $500,000 based on the scoring criteria. Operations B gets $1 million and City C gets $1 million. And they then present that as their findings and their determination of the 10 that came in. That would then go to council and council would approve it just like any other resolution would be approved.
And before you start that point, all of what you stated, I'm just making sure that if it comes here and this committee says, you know what, the project you submitted to us, we see the scoring, you guys recommend it to us, we think is phenomenal, but you get 3 out of 5 on this committee that says, we don't like it, and what happens at that point?
Well, I can just tell you based on the first 6 years, I don't know that this body, we've asked tough questions, we've had some negotiations about points and things of that nature, but if the Economic Development Department at the county executive comes to us and says, this is how they want to spend the money, we have pretty well adopted it and stayed with it, and I would think that the same thing from the 5-member council that's going to present, and they're going to say, okay, here.
Thank you. Question answered.
What's that?
Questions answered. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I would interpret. Do we have the authority to ever kill something from the county executive? Sure. Is our history one in which we've given them a hard time? No. But if somebody is up there telling us why they think that these 3 are better, they darn well better be. And actually, I truly believe that a competitive process is going to give us more input, because what do we get when it comes through? We get 1 of 1. And I would be willing to bet that this group is going to hold the feet to the fire of those 5 individuals more so than what we're, in this particular case, because don't forget, we're appointing these people to yeah. Yes, Mike?
Mr. Chair, just one point of clarification on how the scoring criteria are developed is the 5-member committee develops the criteria using the best practices and identifies the priorities. Then it comes to council, and then council by resolution. I mean, the committee process will likely be taking place here and potentially in conjunction with your committee, given the community development portions of this, but it's ultimately up to council. Council is to adopt the final scoring criteria by resolution and can amend it through the process that's been established.
Thank you, Mike.
Did we amend? I think we amended a little bit of the $100 million fund as time went on, and I can just tell you, based on the practices that we had in Clean Ohio, it existed for about 10 years, and we amended it a couple times. We didn't like the way it was working, so we said, we're going to change it, and this body does have the authority to do that. The other body more than likely will recommend the changes because they're going to say, hey, something's not working. This is not efficient. And I wouldn't be surprised if the 5-member committee wouldn't present something to us. Is there any comments from the executive's office on this? Because you're obviously going to have some input on the committee names and appointments and things of that nature too. And I wasn't suggesting, Chris, you had to have. I was just giving you an opportunity to.
We always appreciate the opportunity to speak by the chairman, but I don't think there's anything we can add further at this point.
Okay. Yeah. Any comments about the idea of having this being a competitive process for this portion of the casino revenue?
I've not had that conversation myself with the executive, so
Okay.
I don't want to
Yeah.
jump ahead of him.
I can't obviously speak for him, but I can say that we did have a conversation about this idea, and he was supportive at the time of the idea because he too believes that there isn't an infinite amount of money, and let the best projects arise to the top is what he was hoping.
Just, I will make one comment, that bringing it out into the communities now, after, the concentration being downtown, certainly is a welcome opportunity for all the communities now to take advantage of this. Many of the mayors, that we speak to on an everyday basis have, while they support the concentration in the core, really are looking forward to the opportunity for development and redevelopment in their areas of town. So they welcome it, and so becomes a great partnership between the executive, you guys, county council, and all the mayors out there who are looking forward to, have been waiting patiently for these opportunities.
Well, and to put my tongue thoroughly into my cheek, they have received money, and they have received more money than downtown received at this point in time between the two projects that have already been approved. The Euclid project and the Van Aken project actually is more money than downtown received, but they sometimes forget that was actually has already taken place because they only remember that the initial for 2 years went downtown. But we are where we are, and let's let good projects win out there. So, hearing no other comments about that, the chair will move that this would go before full council for a second reading. Excuse me, stand corrected. I know. We have a substitute that picks up and addresses these things that I alluded to. And just to reiterate, the repeal of the outdated language, the reconciliation of the community development, the submission of any language has to come back here, and the opportunity to introduce executive session. So the chair will move that we accept the substitute
We
and
already
replace
had
it.
a first and a second, so we need a final vote for the.
Oh,
proposed
I'm sorry,
substitute.
for the substitute? Okay. This is to substitute the original language. Is there approval on that? All say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Okay, now we're ready to bring it out for the substitute. The chair will move that we substitute, the substitute language goes before the full council for a second reading. Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion for the substitute language in the bill? Yes, sir.
I wasn't paying attention at how much money is involved? What's left over? What do we?
It's about, I think, 2.5 right now, I think.
Mr. Chair, that's correct for budget years 16 and 17. It's estimated to bring in about $7 million. So about 3.6 of that is going towards the job creation fund as approved in the budget last year, and we recently had a fiscal item on that. And then $1 million over this year and next year will be going towards the community development supplemental grant program. So the remainder is around $2.5 million is what we expect. It depends on what the actual casino revenues collected are, but that's anticipated what will be used over the next 2 years. After that, it depends on what council and the executive agree to in future budgets.
And obviously, I don't think that as we've already heard, the tax revenues are not going to be very strong, at least out of Cleveland during this RNC, because a lot of people who didn't get down there didn't come down. So you're going to see some drop, I think, probably in casino revenue. But we're about $2.5 million per year at this point in time.
Okay.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Have comments? We've received that. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. That's been moved to for second reading. If we can read the second piece of legislation that we have before us.
Ordinance 2016-0001, amending chapters 802 and 709 of the Cuyahoga County Code regarding the Casino Revenue Fund and Job Creation Fund for consistency with the 2016-2017 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program.
It's been read into the record. I don't know that we're prepared to have this come out of committee today, but I'd love to hear input on that. But the chair also would like to do a corrective item on that, and in which case it's already been submitted to, I think, the three members of the committee to amend removing item C out of 709.02 to agree with what is in the budget resolution, and that is that this goes from 2016 and 2017. We can't speak for budgets going beyond that. What came over from the executive's office had going on infinitum after 2018, and speaking on behalf of what I believe the original budget resolution only covered the first 2 years on that. So the chair would move to amend 02016.0001 to eliminate section C, so it just coincides with the budget resolution. Is there a second to that? Second. Okay, for discussion, all we're doing here with this amendment is just making it coincide. Is that correct, Mike, on that? To coincide with our approval of what we already have on the record as far as our budget, and it says that these monies will move over for budget year 2016 and budget years 2017.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The future budgetary decisions related to casino fund revenues would be made in future budget cycles.
Okay. Any discussion about the chair?
Question?
Yep.
So the job creation fund is just through the 2017 budget?
2016, 2017.
The job creation fund comes from a number of sources, some of them general funds, some of them casino funds, some of them were leftover casino funds from previous years. The component, I think it was 3.8 this year, I don't have it in front of me, and 4 million for next year were agreed to come out of the casino revenue fund and go to the job creation fund. But that is not the totality of funding for the job creation fund. So in terms of finding a sustainable funding source for the job creation fund on an ongoing basis beyond 2017 is something that council and the executive will have to work through in future budget cycles. But this is not the only source of funding for that program.
I understand that. But I just wanted to make sure that this is in agreement with our current obligation on the job creation fund.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was that we would, and you can see it in the amended 3.8 million was in the 2016 budget. 4 million was going out of the 2017 budget. And so all we're doing is making these in harmony with what we actually agreed to as council.
That's exactly what my point
Yep.
I wanted to make.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. Look like, in this particular one, it looks like you do want to make a comment. Yes.
So to be clear, in the legislation, section 802.01 creates the fund itself. It is not sunsetted by virtue of the end of this biennial process. The fund itself is created. What is subject to the timeline is the portion of the casino fund that is explicitly being designated to this at this point. So, and the collection of other revenues that would be collected during this biennial budget process.
Right, and maybe, Mr. Glassburn, if you would be willing to take the mic on this, then we might as well just, as long as we got the dialogue open, let's just, this amendment is only to address the funding. It does not to address any sunsetting of what you folks want to do from a sales and marketing standpoint on that. But it is only relating to the portion that is part of the budget.
Correct. Just wanted to make sure that was understood and that the references to the dates is because of the budget process and is not a referencing of a phasing out of the program after 2 years necessarily.
And as I recall, last time when this was, and I did not want to bring this piece of legislation up either because I thought that it was going to get confusing until we had the community development supplemental behind us. That's behind us. Now we moved on to our competitive one. Now we're into the one that came over from the county executive's side of the aisle. I assume there's no objection to removing this language then from your standpoint, Ms. Glassburn?
No, I just, again, I think I've made the point clear.
Yep.
I will mention that this piece of legislation, the previous piece of legislation, and there may be one other out there, all delete references to pieces of the current code that are no longer relevant. And so there may, I haven't gone through this with a fine tooth comb. There may be a little bit of reconciling between these different bills that needs to occur just to make sure that they're not in conflict with each other. But in principle, there should be no conflict between this or the previous bill or other legislation that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's specifically why I wasn't going to vote yours out. I was going to run this one by. We've got the first one already through and passed in legislation, and you signed, the council, the county executive signed the community development supplemental, so that's behind it. Then we moved on over now to the competitive process for what's remaining in council side. So we're going to run that thing through, get that finalized, and then, sorry, yours is last. And then we're going to run yours through the reconciliation to make sure that there aren't any conflicts. And if there are, then we'll clean that up with a supplemental. The one, though it's not a conflict, it's just a comment. Whether you want to create jobs, to me, your jobs creation, naming and conventions and stuff like that is more of a marketing thing as opposed to a fund. And I would highly suggest that you maybe not necessarily do that. I would, leave it as casino revenue fund, leave it over there so that so it's a lot cleaner. But that's certainly your purview because marketing comes and goes and it changes out there. And God forbid, it could be in 2 years, could be the recovery plan or, things of that nature if we should hit a recession or something of that nature. So I just only caution you on that by dropping in marketing brands in the middle of legislation, but that's your call on that one out there. So that's I don't intend to vote this out and bring it before us. I don't think it's going to be magical. You've already got everything running and operational. So from that standpoint, any other questions for Mr. Glassburn? As long as he's here. Hearing none. The amended language, Chrissy, are we all set with this? As far as we had moved and seconded on the amendment?
Yeah, we had a first
okay,
and a
let's-
second.
Okay, we moved and seconded. All in favor of the amended language that removes beyond 2017, say aye. Aye. Hearing, any opposed? None opposed. The language has now been amended, so we will clean that up and we'll bring this back up for review in a couple weeks. We'll get the competitive one passed and get it through council, and then we'll come back and clean this up. And we'll give you plenty of notice on this, Chris, to make sure that, and if you see some conflicts too, don't feel free to raise it. I think that those are the only two items before. Is there any miscellaneous business from anyone bring forward?
Mr. Chairman? Yes.
Yes. Mr. Harrison?
The May Company project. Do we have some kind of status of what's going on with that?
Sure.
Whereas that I know they were denied the state tax credits this last time. Can you just give us an update on what's going on? Are we continue to hold that? If so, why?
The May Company project, I believe at this point in time, unless anybody else knows anything more about it, I don't believe it's going to go forward because they were hoping to get approval on it. So we never allocated a final approval. There was never any funding that went forward in regards to it. So unless I'm missing something else that anybody knows anything about, the last time I was aware of the project, and I did get some updates from them from the principals on it, I don't think it's going to go forward under that vein. Now, it doesn't say that the guy who owns the building, that is still the biggest eyesore, I believe, on Public Square, and I think the owner of the building might be able to do something. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yep. Any other questions? Yes.
If-
Ms. Glassman,
if
unless
I-
you have any other updates?
If I may, I would just say very clearly that the county's potential support had been conditional upon the state tax credit. That's not to say that we're not open to new proposals, but in the absence of state tax credit, the previous understanding is not in place.
Yeah, the people who came before this committee testified that the state tax credit was critical to their being able to do their stacking of their financing. The next person might walk in here with deep pockets and say, that piece, just like last Friday, would be the piece that actually tops off the building. And the bad news about risk takers is sometimes their risk goes south, and my understanding is those folks have probably lost all their investment dollars in there. The owner still owns the building, and the owner still has one of the most valuable assets on Public Square.
Absolutely.
And I would love to, I think we would all agree, we'd love to see that thing fixed up, because that's the last piece of the corner jewels that'll go on there.
I think that would be a great piece to add to the Jerkins portfolio.
I said deep pockets, I said not lean pockets.
Got it. Just to Mr. Glassburn's point, are you talking about proposals from the same folks who are looking to redo the May Company building, or are you talking about anyone, or what?
I'm saying that just because this project with the state tax credit fell through doesn't mean that the county would never be open to having another discussion on that. But as of right now, we view it as we do not have any arrangement whatsoever. So,
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Carney is the one who came here and testified in regards to that, and that was his business proposal. He did not receive the tax credits through his corporation, so Mr. Carney's proposal is off the table. The owner did not lose anything in regards to ownership. Nothing changed as far as that, from that aspect. And if you're out there, I would encourage you to come forth with a proposal, because I think everybody would love to see that. It looks as though to the west, there's proposal to develop property to the west, and that would complete the entire circle if we could get the May Company to be finished on there.
I just wanted to make sure that there was, funds were not being held or set aside, just kind of sitting there waiting for the folks who wanted to develop this May Company building, that, it was just.
Yep, at this point in time, those funds are now, they're available if a proposal comes in, and they're sitting there. Yep.
All right.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Is there any public comment unrelated to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
And I really do appreciate Mr. Harrison coming in, Mr. Dramatic coming in out there. Thank you very much. Hearing nothing else, adjourn the meeting. And thanks, guys, for coming in. I really appreciate it.